Hello and welcome. I'm so glad that you could join us here today. I'm here with my good pal Serge. Please introduce yourself. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Marcus. My name is Sergey Mekhtiyev. I'm the founding partner of Mekhtiyev Law Firm. As you know, we specialize in real estate, residential, commercial, representing both buyers, sellers, and lenders. We do focus a little bit on startups as well, but we're here today to discuss some residential real estate.
And if any of you know or work with myself or Serge, you need a real estate attorney in New York. It's really important. There are many things that can go wrong, and to have someone navigate the waters with you is very important, wouldn't you say?
I agree.
Yeah.
I always tell all of my clients the process of buying a home in New York could be stressful, especially dealing with real estate brokers such as yourself, dealing with attorneys.
Unless you have the good ones. Unless you have the good
ones.
Yeah.
So I always tell them you need to surround yourself with people that will make the process easier and will be able to walk you from the beginning to the end of the process and help you alleviate that stress of purchasing a home.
Yeah, and I always say that people who, if you have a full-time job, buying a home, you maybe do it 2-3 times in your whole life, and it becomes a full-time job. So you need to have professionals who are doing it every day, have network of people, other professionals who handle lending, law, know people in the buildings, know people in the condo buildings, co-ops, even just simple stuff like contractors. So we're here in New York. It's the beginning of the busy season in New York, which is the spring. It's a lovely February day. March is around the corner. My birthday is on the 23rd, just a reminder. And today we're going to talk about first-time home buyers. And I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of clients who reach out to me and think that the process of buying a home, especially their first-time home,
Right,
is very daunting. And it can be, but it's not as hard as you think it is. So we're going to walk everybody through the steps of buying their first-time home.
Sure, absolutely. With the first-time home buyers, especially when you get someone out of state, the question they would ask me, do I really need an attorney? And my answer is always yes. In New York you do. In many other states you do not. You can buy and sell, but here you do.
So is that mandated by law, or is it just highly recommended?
It is highly recommended, and that I would say that's the nature of a practice, of buying and selling real estate in New York, only because most of the deals are not really straightforward deals. As you know yourself, a lot of these properties come with liens, violations, and judgments. Almost never you have a property where the seller is selling it free and clear of everything.
Yeah.
And then you're just there and ready to buy.
Yeah, and that, I've had experiences in the past where we've had tenants who wouldn't vacate. Violations against the property where you couldn't clear, that we weren't aware of to the very last minute, and thankful to really great attorneys, we found these things out.
Absolutely.
So I guess if someone calls me on the internet or a friend shoots me an Instagram message, which I guess is how people contact you these days, I prefer a phone call. The first thing I would tell everybody is to understand your budget, and understanding your budget is really important because you don't want to waste your time, anyone else's time, or our time. You need to, I always say, to go anywhere, you have to start somewhere.
Right.
So I would say, number one, get a pre-approval from a lender. Wouldn't you say that's a good starting point?
Absolutely, absolutely. Having a pre-approval from a lender would actually help the buyer when they go to an open house. Having that pre-approval with them, a lot more sellers will take them more seriously. Yeah.
I mean, I've had some people who just will call me and just write me an email and be like, let's make an offer for $5 million. So then they think that just my word is okay. You need to have paperwork.
Absolutely. And that's something I always recommend to my clients as well. If they come in to me, and even when speaking to the brokers, I always tell them, if you have a client that's looking to buy, they don't have a specific property, they can still speak to an attorney. When I have those clients that come in, they haven't made an offer yet, they know that they're buying. I always ask them, what is the price range you're looking to buy? And I always ask them, Is there a mortgage? If there is, do you have that pre-approval?
Hmm.
Me having their budget of what they're looking to buy, me having that pre-approval, I can help them calculate the closing costs, which in New York, it adds up.
Yeah, it can add up and can vary. And it's nice, you don't want to get to the end of a deal and be short, or you need to buy furniture. You gotta move. You want to managing your money in that way, and knowing from the beginning is the best way to avoid complications moving forward. So,
Yeah.
And step number one usually come to me first.
Yes.
Sorry, but if you don't, get a pre-approval letter, and then step number two, you usually
speak to an attorney. Especially when it comes to real estate, you would want to engage someone who works in the real estate field, who is a real estate attorney. I always get the clients who tell me, I have a brother, I have a friend, I have a cousin who's an attorney. That attorney does not practice or practices in a completely different field. A lot of my clients are attorneys as well, who do not practice real estate. They know a lot about their field, but they don't know much about real estate, and they would still retain another attorney to represent them, because at the end of the day, you want someone who understands and knows the field and can help simplify the process for this client moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. In the world, I always feel that I'm a passion. I used to always want to do everything by myself. Even when I was a kid, I wanted to be the pitcher and the catcher and all the positions in a sports team. But as I've gotten older, I realized specializing and understanding the minutia of things when it comes to construction, real estate, even just cooking, like knowing those details makes everything a lot easier.
Absolutely.
And I would say, I guess the next now that you have either a pre-approval or you have proof of funds, you have talked to a real estate agent or broker, preferably with someone who you have a good relationship with moving forward, understand, say you want to be in downtown Brooklyn, or you want to be in uptown Manhattan, maybe you want to be in New Jersey. It is good to have people who are familiar with the product, the people who are selling the properties, because it does help. And sometimes you're aware of properties coming to the market before other people do.
Right.
So I guess next step would be managing expectations.
Sure, managing expectations. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll just walk you through the process of, I guess, once the client comes to me to the end.
Perfect.
As soon as we have the first consultation, pretty much that's quick and easy. I ask them what their end goal is. Most of the time, we don't even ask them the purchase price because that's irrelevant to the services that we provide. A client that's buying something for $300,000 or for $10 million would be treated exactly the same here at our firm. So first, we do our due diligence. Whether it's if it's a condo or co-op, we review the minutes, we review financials for the building. We speak to the client before, present all of that to them, even before we take a look at the contract. If it's a private home, I always suggest that the clients do an inspection. They hire an inspector, spend a couple of $100, but at the end of the day, they know what the issues are with the house. And based off those issues, you can renegotiate the purchase price or renegotiate the credit at the closing. Once the due diligence process is done, we move on to the contract. Basically, as soon as the contract comes in, what I usually do, I summarize the contract for their client. I send that to them usually via email, and then we run through the whole contract either in person over the phone or again via email. The goal is, and that's what I tell my clients, I want them to understand the contract and I want them to be comfortable with every single term in the contract before it's executed, so they know exactly what they're signing.
So let's backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
When you meant the contract, there's a difference between the contract of sale and closing, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So could you, say Billy Joe, he went to his lender, we saw a few properties, we made an offer based on our pre-approval or proof of funds with our general terms, we get a contract. You just explained the details of a contract. What happens after buyer and seller sign a contract?
So the way it works here, usually the seller's attorney prepares the contract, sends it to the buyer's attorney, who, like I said, would review, summarize, and speak to the buyer. Once the terms are, both sides are in agreement with the terms, the buyer signs the contract, provides the down payment check.
And what's a typical down payment?
So typically, it would be about 10% of the purchase price. And all of that, together with the contract, is sent to the seller's attorney, who receives everything. The down payment check is placed into an attorney escrow account, and it's there protected up until the closing. Then we have a seller execute the contract, and as soon as the seller executes the contract, both sides are officially in a binding agreement. And the agreement, if there's no mortgage involved, pretty much the only condition is that the property is free and clear of any liens, violations, or judgments. If there is a mortgage involved, the condition is the mortgage commitment. They have some time, usually it's 30 days or 45 days from the day the contract is signed, to obtain a commitment from the lender. And once that commitment is in place, the lender usually needs another week or two to clear anything else that's outstanding and move to the closing date.
Okay, so can you clarify the difference between a pre-approval and the commitment? The pre-approval is basically your financials have been reviewed by the bank.
Yes.
And the commitment is the official. We are lending, the money is clear, and we're going to lend on this property.
Right.
Correct.
So sometimes the commitment can be conditional as well. Basically, the lender would say, we ran your credit. You provided all these documents. We will lend you the money, subject to, and they would outline a few fields. Please provide tax returns for the last year, or you need additional funds. How are you going to pay for the common charges if it's a condo or co-op, or things of that sort? Or they would want the seller to maybe repair a sidewalk. Or something. So there are a few minor conditions that have to be met before it's the file is clear to close, and only then we can schedule the closing.
Okay, so commitment is issued. We have a closing in the books. We're about to meet at the closing table. What are some common issues that come up at a closing that a first-time home buyer might not be aware of?
Usually everything is straightforward and smooth up until...
if your attorneys are doing a good job, and your real estate brokers.
And the mortgage brokers.
So
it's pretty much everyone. Your whole team is doing a good job. You get to the closing. Let's say we have a closing scheduled tomorrow. I always recommend that my clients do a final walkthrough during the daytime, within 24 hours before the closing date. And that's when you have issues that come up. Most of the time you come in, sometimes the seller was moving out, they left a bunch of stuff in a house.
A pipe burst, maybe something happened even without their knowledge. Maybe.
Absolutely, that happens as well. Sometimes the seller moves out, and especially if it's a winter, pipes freeze, no one was running the water, and it bursts. Seller is absolutely responsible for the house, unit, whatever it might be, up until the closing date, up until the transfer is official and the deed is transferred from the seller to the buyer. So during the walkthrough, I always tell the clients to look around to make sure that there are no leaks, the windows open and close, appliances are in working order. Sometimes you might have that the stove is not working, or the dishwasher or something like that. There are no cracks anywhere. The regular wear and tear, you will always have that.
Yeah, of course.
Especially in New York. There's a lot of resales, and most of the time you're not buying something from the sponsor, something new.
Yeah.
So, like I said, wear and tear is fine, but you want to make sure that the unit is in broom clean condition, meaning it doesn't need to be spotless, but garbage shouldn't be laying around everywhere, so it needs to be clean.
Yeah. And also, if you have like a multi-family unit, you want to make sure tenants aren't there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that can be an issue if you acquire a property and you don't check it and a tenant is there, and then you are responsible for that.
So that's when that walkthrough comes into play. And once the buyer looks at the property, it needs to be vacant and in broom clean condition. only then we move on to the closing. Sometimes when the stuff is still laying around there, what happens is we still close, we still sign all the documents, and one of the attorneys would hold a certain sum of money in their escrow for a day or two or three until everything is cleaned up and everything is removed in accordance with the contract.
So would that be similar to like a concession? Say I'm purchasing a house, I go into the condo and a window's broken, but I want to close tomorrow. What would we do?
So what we do is there are two ways of handling something like this. For example, we can just get the credit at the closing. Let's say it costs $500 to repair a window. The seller will just give a buyer a credit of $500, and the buyer will take on the repairs themselves. Or we'll say, you know what, we'll hold a little bit more money in escrow, and we'll have the seller repair, and they have 5 days after the day of the contract to come in and repair the window.
All right. So those are your two options if you have an issue come up that you want to close, and it's not major. It's not.
They're not major.
Yeah.
No, something major would be there's a mortgage and the seller doesn't have enough money to pay off that mortgage. For example, we would not do the transaction until the seller comes up with enough funds to pay everything off.
So I guess to finish up here, this is another question I guess first-time home buyers have, because a lot of people have buyer's remorse, or they're nervous that it's the biggest purchase of their life. What happens if, let's give two scenarios. What if the buyer decides he wants this house, he signed a contract, the process is going, and all of a sudden something asides like losing a job or something major happened, they just don't want the apartment. What would happen to their deposit then?
So the contract is a binding contract on both sides, both on the buyer and the seller. The seller commits to selling this apartment free and clear, and the buyer commits to buying something like this. If it's before the mortgage commitment is issued, for example, they lose their job, the bank will not issue a mortgage commitment at that point, and that's one of the conditions to the closing.
Mortgage contingency is what we call. We can go into that into a different.
And the down payment may be returned. If it's something that happens after the bank already commits to the loan, most of the time the buyer would lose the down payment. And the down payment is there to kind of protect the seller as well, to make sure that since they're taking the unit off the market, right? Yeah. And they're waiting for the buyer to obtain the mortgage and to clear everything, they need to be protected as well, and they need to be compensated in some way.
And so, lastly, I guess, so what happens if you're the buyer? So we're talking about first-time home buyers, and for some reason the seller decides, oh, I love this house, my children were born here, and I don't want to move to Nebraska. Like what? And there's no reason for it. It's just a personal decision. What if any is ramifications are for the seller? And say the buyer was in a lease and they already told they were going to leave, and now they don't have a place to live. What would happen then?
Well, if the buyer still wants the unit, they can go through the court system. Yeah. It's always, and that would be called a forced sale. So the judge would look at the contract, and if the terms are clear that the seller has to sell and the buyer has to buy, they would issue a court order forcing the sale.
Well, now that you've heard about the process of buying your first home and what issues can arise, please reach out to us if you are looking to buy a home or you have any real estate questions or legal questions. Serge, thanks for joining me. Do you have any last things you want to say?
Like I said, you need to surround yourself with someone who will help you simplify the process, who will walk you through the process, and be there to answer your questions. As a first-time home buyer, you always have questions. And I tell my clients, you think of something, shoot me an email, shoot me a text, give me a call. I'd rather you ask me all these questions than sit there and think and go Google stuff. Yeah.
And also, one thing I also love is that you always pick up the phone, which is really good, which not everybody does. So I appreciate that. All right, Serge, great. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Good. Until next time.
You got it.